I just wanted to welcome everybody. We're all gathered here together for a very important opportunity, an important opportunity to show our thanks and appreciation for the heart and the kindness and the love and the dedication and the goodness of a very special Holocaust survivor named Lena Zak, or Konigstein, her maiden name. Anytime you have a survivor, a person who's... Sure, how's that? Anytime you have a person who has lived such a life, it's a duty incumbent upon us to give tribute to that life, to discuss the life and to share the life so that it is always remembered and never forgotten, that her story, who she is, who she was, will be remembered for generations and generations. There's of course a historical part, what she went through, but the person part, what her soul and herself did through all those difficult times. So today we're here to tell her story, all the hardships she went through, but all the beauty and the kindness and love that came out throughout. We're to do this as an honor for her, as a kavod achron for her, but also to give the comfort to the family, her late husband Irving of blessed memory, to give comfort to her daughters, to Sandra and her husband Bud Jones, to her daughter Gloria and her husband Robert Jaffe, to her sister Rose, who's here all the way from Florida to be here on the special occasion, as well as her dear sister Ada, who's not here in body, but with us in spirit, very much so. As well as her other descendants, her extended family, her dear friends, her neighbors who are here today. We're here to share her story to inspire you and to give you comfort in this loss that you have all had. I will start with a selection from the Psalms. We read the familiar Psalm 23. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo iksar, Binais deshech yarbitzeni, al mei menuchos yenachaleni. Nashi eshovev yancheni v'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elach begeit somaves lo ira ra ki ata imadi. Shiftecha numishantecha hema yenachamoni. Tairach lefanai shulchan neged tzorai. Tishante v'shemen roshi kosi revaya. Achtov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai. V'shavte beveis adinoi la'orech yamim. Please feel free to join me in the familiar words of the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in right paths for his name's sake. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff comfort me. Thou hast set before me a table in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. There's something known as the Eshet Chayil, the woman of valor, which is a selection from the Proverbs, and is customary to read this at the funeral of a woman of valor. Eshes chayil miyimsa, verachok mipnei mechra, batach balev bala, vishalo lo yeksar, gemal sutov eloira, kol yemei chayecha, darshet semeru fishtim, bitas bechapetz kapecha, haisa keni yaisaicher, mi merchak tavi lachma, bitacham biyahai laila, bititin teref levesa rachoik narosecha, zamama sadev tikachechu, mi pricha pecha natakarem, hagra beyois masnecha, bitame soyasecha, Tama ki toiv sachra, lo yechbe balayla, neira yadecha shilcha v'kishor, bekapecha samchu fale, kappa parsa liani, ve'yadecha shilcha le'evyon l'sira mibesa mishaleg, ki kol besa levushanim, marvadi masasala, sheish vargaman levusha, noide bisharim bala, b'shiftoim ziknei yaret sadi masasavetim kor, v'hagor nasno kanani, oiz v'hadar levusha, v'tischek l'yoyim acharoin, bicha pascha v'hachma, b'sayras chesed al lishoin al tzaviyah halicha ispeisa, b'lechem latzus lo sochel, kamu v'necha v'yashura, bala v'yehala rabos panos hasochayil, v'yatali sakulana, sheker achein, v'hevel hayoifi, isha yiras adonai, Hisis halel tenula mi priyadecha vi halelucha vishari masecha. An accomplished woman who can find, far beyond pearls is her value. Her husband's heart relies on her, and he shall lack no fortune. She repays his good, but never his harm, all the days of her life. She seeks out wool and linen, and her hands work willingly. She is like a merchant ship, from afar she brings sustenance. She arises while it is nighttime, and gives food to her household. She envisions a field, and she buys it. From the fruit of her handiwork she plants a vineyard. With strength she girds her loins, and invigorates her arms. She discerns that her enterprise is good, her lamp is not snuffed out by the night. Her hands she stretches out to the distaff, and her palms support the spindle. She spreads out her palm to the poor, and extends her hands to the destitute. She fears not snow, for her whole household, her entire household, is clothed with scarlet wool. Distinctive in the councils is her husband, when he sits with the elders of the land. She makes a cloak to sell, and delivers a belt to the peddler. Strength and majesty are her raiment. She joyfully awaits the last day. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and a lesson of kindness is on her tongue. She anticipates the ways of her household, and partakes not of the bread of laziness. Her children arise and praise her. Her husband, he lauds her. Many daughters have amassed achievement, but you surpassed them all. False is grace, and vain is beauty. A God-fearing woman, she should be praised. Give her the fruits of her hands, and let her be praised in the gates by her own deeds. It was such an honor for me to sit with her children, with Sandy and with Gloria, and to hear the tales that they had about their mother. It was unfortunate we only had a few hours. It was one of those conversations that could have taken months and months and months, and that a story of a person which could only be unfolded appropriately in a true lifetime of sharing her experiences. But for you today, we have just the nuggets, the most beautiful treasures of her life, which just hint at the greatness that's still out there that we're not going to be able to speak about. But in light of the time, we're going to do the best we can to share the life of this wondrous woman. Our beloved Leah Bas Yechezkel, our Lena, she was born May 18th, 1923, to a beautiful Jewish family, to parents Yechezkel and Shendel, a family of 7 children, 3 boys and 4 girls. The family name was, I hope to pronounce it correctly, Koenigstein, and they lived in a well-known place known as Białystok, Poland. Białystok wasn't the shtetl, it was a city. It was the second largest city next to Warsaw in Poland. And this was a city that was a real Yiddish city, of which the occupants were more than half, or approximately half, Jewish, and had a tremendously strong Jewish character to this place. And indeed it was a beautiful life, living in this city, living in this beautiful Jewish culture with such a large, special family. A family that celebrated the Jewish holidays, a family that lived together and was so unified and so together and so caring of one another. But this beautiful family and this beautiful life was interrupted by terrible things. In 1939, Poland was occupied, and it would be occupied throughout World War II and eventually taken by the Soviets, and returning later on to be modern-day Poland. For the first few years of the war, all the Jews of Bialystok, were hoarded into the ghettos. They were abused and they were malnourished. All of their property was seized. Every attempt to defame them and embarrass them and intimidate them was taken. It was indeed a very, very difficult existence. Disease was rampant and malnutrition. And her own parents, unfortunately, suffered their fate under these conditions when Bialystok was a ghetto. Several years later, around 1943, the ghetto was to be closed, and all the Jews who had somehow survived the ghetto would be liquidated, and the first action was to take place, and the Jews were taken away in mass to the gas chambers of Treblinka and Bergen-Belsen and other sites. Our Lena, was only 15 years old when the war started, and she would later be 19 years old when she was finally liberated. She was first taken to a labor camp outside of the city under horrible conditions, and then she and her sisters moved on a death march, a march where they had to walk miles through freezing temperatures with no food, with no shelter, for days upon days, eventually ending up in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. Needless to say, the experiences in the concentration camp were awful and too difficult to imagine here. And our worst imaginations, our worst thoughts of what we think it could be like, were probably not enough. But finally, the end came, and the Allies moved in, and they were able to move those who survived the camp to shelter. And she was ultimately liberated by the British in 1945. How did she survive? How did she get through all of these difficult times? One thing I first learned was that she was very close to her father. Her father gave her many good advice for living and being strong. And she reminded the girls that they have to stay together, that they have to watch over each other no matter what. One such story of her father's advice being put into effect was one in which they were on the death march. And her sister, Ida, they were together, and they had a short respite, if you want to call it that, in which Ida was in a barn, and there was nothing to eat. The best you could do was grass soup and scraps, things that you could find. But Lena decided that she would go to a nearby village and procure some food, see what she could get for her ailing sister. And there she was found by a soldier, and the soldier looked at her and looked at her appearance and assumed that she wasn't Jewish. And he asked her, he said, "What are you doing? You don't look Jewish." And she could have run. She could have been free at that very moment. But she decided that that was not what she wanted to do. That she would instead go and get food for her sister, come back to the barn, and return to being a Jew on her way to the concentration camp. It was better to die with her sister than to be free anywhere else. In these circumstances, typhoid and disease was rampant. And the prisoners had to be counted. They had to have their daily lines. And Lena was always deeply concerned. How would her sister make it in these lines? If there was any hint that she was weak or she couldn't make it, she would be ended at that very moment. And so that was her motivation, to make sure her sister could stand up in line and that she could be strong. Anything she could do to help her sister stand up and not look like she was sick. Her other sister, Rose, who we are blessed to have here today, she was separated after the war and to a different free zone, which was occupied by the British. And Rose made efforts to find her sisters, but whenever she would ask around in her area, she would be told that there were no survivors from the Koenigstein family. And after hearing this fact so many times, she began to cry and accepted what seemed to be a very sad fate. However, the news did leak that indeed there were survivors from her family. So she decided that she had to sneak over to the other zone, the Russian zone, and try there once again to find her family members, to ask one person, then another person, to perhaps be able to figure out through word of mouth. And the first Jewish person she saw on the Russian side, this person was turned around and she was doing her laundry. She couldn't see Rose as Rose was approaching her. And Rose went up to her to ask her, "What of my family? What of my family? Do you know?" And lo and behold, that was her sister herself who answered. She was right there to say that, "I'm here. I survived. I'm going to be with you. There are many such stories throughout the war. There were times when, earlier on in the times of the ghetto, where she knew a Jewish doctor, and the Jewish doctor felt that she should go back to her family. She shouldn't have to stay in the harder circumstances of the ghetto. But Lena said, no, don't take me. Even though I look small and I look more frail, instead let my sister go back. Let my sister go back to the family and let me stay here. After the war was over, after her somewhat freedom, she would go on to meet her beloved husband Irving, someone who himself had gone through similar tragedies and trials. So it was Ida, and Rose, and ultimately her brother Joe, who would survive the war, and no one else. A quick little thing about her brother Joe, to talk about him as a person, but also maybe to speak about the family. What a strong family this was. What courageous people these people were. I just learned recently from Rose that when Joe was 14 years old, he decided that it was time to go to Israel. And he basically slipped away from the family just before the war started. He got in a boat, hidden in the lower chambers of the boat, and would eventually pop up in Israel. And he didn't just pop up in Israel, he became a national hero. He was part of the Haganah, he fought against the British occupation, and ultimately he was one of the brave commandos that led a large squad of soldiers, which ultimately got all the way to Jerusalem. And he himself settled on a kibbutz in Israel, in northern Israel, the same kibbutz where the famous Golda Meir had planted her roots. And later on, Joe came to America at the behest of his sisters. Even though they knew he was an Israeli hero, and even though his heart was in Israel, it was so important that the family was together, and they made sure that he was well taken care of, and that he would join them in New York, in the United States. So back to Lena. She came to the United States, to Cleveland, which is where her husband had some relatives who sponsored their settling. So it was hard at first. Her two sisters were in New York, and she was in Cleveland. And it was very hard to adjust to a new country. It didn't seem like she knew what to do or felt comfortable asking people for advice, but that didn't stop her from moving forward. Her husband was a talented watchmaker, and he worked in a shop on 14th Street and Prospect. And they would later live very nearby, just down the street, on Mayfield and Coventry. But unfortunately, Irving's luck in the store was not always so good. He suffered many upsets at the workplace, even being held up by gunpoint. But his wife's response was that he should not be scared. He should not have to go to work alone. And so she would stay with him. She would go with him to work and stay with him throughout the workday to make sure that he was okay, that she was safe. She really wanted to make her home a beautiful place, a sanctuary for her whole family. And there were many tools that she had, many great abilities that made this possible. She had a great knack in gardening. She could make anything grow. She would see the most beautiful things in a neighbor's garden and just take a small section, a little stem, a little bud, and she would take it with her and she would make it blossom into a beautiful bush, into a beautiful tree, so that her family can enjoy the fruits later on. She seemed to have a real gift to make things grow, the blessing of her hands. She also got a lot of joy from creating things, from her arts and her crafts. We all know that she was very adept at needlepoint, and I understand there was a beautiful needlepoint sitting in her room, in the nursing home that she lived in her last few years. Growing up, her parents didn't perhaps think that she had all that it took to be a great cook. To be a Jewish cook, a balabusta, was a huge task in those days. So it seemed like she wasn't up to it, but I think she proved that she could do it. She became a highly successful cook, and her food was very well liked by her family and by her friends. And she really stuck to her roots, to her traditions. She made the food of her people. She made the potato latkes, she made the cholent, she made the brisket, she made the kreplach, the gefilte fish, and many more. And I'm sure it was very tempting as an American lady to start using Velveeta and convenience foods and cooking like an American, but perhaps she felt that we have to remember who we are, where we came from. So cholent and brisket are the way to go. If you speak to anyone about her, one of the first words that they share, besides her kindness, is how smart she was. Rose told me that many times earlier today. What a bright woman she was. She only had an 8th grade education before the war, and in fact, she qualified for a unique scholarship. And under easier times, when there wasn't anti-Semitism in admissions, where there wasn't a war on its way, she could have used a scholarship to go to an institution of higher learning. So she couldn't. It didn't work out that way. But her father knew that she would be okay. Her father would always tell her that you're very smart, but don't worry, your smarts would come from books. And books are always available. You always find books in the library, in the stores to read. And that's exactly what happened. And Rose really painted the picture for me again, that at home, that's what the parents would do. They would always read to the children, and they always wanted more and more and more. They had a hunger for books. And, if it wasn't for bedtime, they would read on and on into the morning hours. And she was such a bright lady, not just in terms of books, but she always knew what to do. She had good advice for life. She knew how to solve problems. She was such a smart woman, in fact, that when she was in school, even though she was a student, she was often called upon to be a substitute teacher because she knew the subjects perhaps as well as anyone else. And when she came to the United States, she even had the dream that what if I became a teacher? What if I could teach in this new country in a foreign language? Her personality made her very good at many things, including the details of life, the small details of life, and she was truly the family archivist. She was able to clearly convey all the stories of the war, where she had been and where she was going. Not only was she organized about the details, but she had a courage, she had an ability to speak. So many times the Holocaust survivor would say, I just can't talk about this, it's just too difficult. I don't have the peace of mind, I can't go back to that situation. But it sounds like for her, she had this special blessing. She could pay tribute to everything that she had been through in her life. And again, Rose, in these few minutes we just had, was able to share with me another amazing thing, which was that her husband's family had all gone to Argentina before the war, and that it was important to keep track of who they were. Let's figure out where did they go, what were their names, how could we connect to them once again. And once again, Lena's abilities came through. She was one who wrote to Argentina. She was one who remembered everyone's names. She remembered all the distant cousins and the aunts, perhaps, and was able to figure it out, to ultimately build the connection between her family in Cleveland to the family in Argentina, and then ultimately from the family in Argentina to Joseph. And I understand that was one of the amazing things, is that they found Joseph by means of Lena's writing to the Argentinian family and her letting them know that the brother, in fact, was alive and he was in the United States, and it all came together, again, thanks to her great abilities. But all of these abilities wouldn't be as good if they weren't housed in the heart of kindness. She was full of kindness all the time. And one of the greatest signs of her kindness was that even in her last years, where her memory wasn't the same, she certainly couldn't always remember who people were and what she was doing at any particular situation. But that didn't mean she forgot who she was. She was always giving everyone kisses and hugs and telling them that she loved them. And for me, that really shows that that's the essence of her personality. You might forget what you had for lunch, but you can never forget that you were a person of kindness. And the greatest expression of happiness and a heart full of kindness and joy is the fact that you can sing. When your heart is exploding with joy, you want to let it out. You want to share it with other people. And that's who she was. She loved to sing. She grew up singing in Polish and a little bit of Yiddish. And later on, when her dear husband taught her Yiddish and taught her many songs in Yiddish, she took on these beautiful songs. And it was a musical family that she came from. It's no surprise. Her father sang beautiful songs at the Shabbos table and the Yom Tov table. And, many of the celebrations, the Jewish celebrations of music, she had in her kishkas, in her being. And indeed, it's this musical ability that she passed along to her children, to Sandy, who has a lot of musical abilities, I understand. Gloria. I heard both, but... So Gloria was the one who sang the songs to her. Gloria learned a lot of the Yiddish lullabies, and Gloria paid close attention to her mom when she would sing, and she in turn shared the same songs back later on. But Sandy surely has her own talents, one of which being humility. So maybe it's an untapped talent. That's what we're getting at. So to conclude, we know that she was a Yiddish mama in every sense. We were playing some music as we walked in, and one of those songs was the famous song, the Yiddish mama. And, it's really worthwhile to look up the words in depth. Every word of that song is really golden and really beautiful. But the theme of the song is that Yiddish mama will do anything for her family. Through fire, through water, through any struggle, She's always there to take care of them and to love them no matter what. There was no such thing as I'm too tired. There's no such thing as I'm too busy. There is always more to do for your children. So indeed, that was her way in being a Yiddish mama. And of course, her daughters are humble people, and they don't need the praise, and my praise certainly. But I know that you really showed your mother what it means to be kind. In her last few years, she did need help. She did need support and caring. And you guys were so meticulous in making sure that she was taken care of. I know Gloria went there all the time and making sure that her medicines were right, and the doctor stuff, and all the health issues that inevitably came up. And you made sure that her reparations were taken care of and all the legal stuff, and that was done correctly. And it sounds like Sundays was Sandy's day, to bring her a lot of cheer and joy and happiness. And so I think that to conclude, it's a very special story. Because so often we have the story of a Holocaust survivor, which is one of bravery and courage and heroism, but it's also bittersweet, because there isn't the ability to come to terms and accept the new life. There's always a focus on the past. There's so much unfinished business. There's so much sadness. There's so much mystery and so much unknown. And indeed, those people are so courageous and to be recognized. But even more so, a life that Lena had, where she was able to do it all, to go from the worst situations to the best situations and enjoy it, and to show nothing but love and caring and happiness. So we truly thank her for who she was, and we thank her for who she will be, because someone like her surely will influence us today and going forward to be strong and to be happy and to be focused on who we are. So for that, we give her a lot of thanks and a lot of appreciation, and we're all very honored that we knew her and that we were her friends, and we shared these 93 years with her in this world. If anyone would like to share a few words to come forward, it's not an obligation, but if someone would like to.
There's a couple of us. Do you, Aunt Rose, would like to, you want to say something? Yeah, Aunt Rose.
Okay, so we call upon her dear sister Rose to share a few words.
Yeah, and then you can say.
Thank you. The light. Good afternoon. Is it afternoon?
Oh,
Morning. Yeah. First of all, I want to say thank you to everybody who is here. I'm her sister. My sister was one of a kind. She was beautiful outside and she was beautiful inside. If she met somebody and she gave you a hug, which you knew it was a hug. My friends always said, if she gives me a hug, I feel like my mother hugs me. She was warm, and she was good. She was special. As a child, she was in school special. She was very smart, very educated. When somebody was sick from the teachers, the principal could come over, took her from the class, and she was the teacher in the lower class. Could be for a day, could be for 2 days, or whatever reason, but she was very outgoing. She liked to teach. She was very warm. Before the war, she was already finished with all the exams and everything. She was supposed to go to university. But the war came out and she wasn't capable. She took always care of me because she was big and I was small. I think she was one of the biggest girls in school. So she always took it. Nobody touched me, nobody hit me because they were afraid if they're going to do something to me, my sister going to take care of them. So nobody ever touched me. The only problem was she was big and I was small. If I was going, she needed 1 step, I needed 2. So when she was going, after a while, I had to run to catch up with her. If she was nice, she stood up and waited till I come over, and when we go together again. Then after a while, I still had to run after her. So, but wherever she went, she took me. A certain place after the war, I was younger, so she couldn't take me certain places what she went to. So, because they were all in the same ages, so I couldn't go with her. but mostly of the time she took me all over with her. I remember, I don't know what to say, but I don't remember ever to have an argument with her. She was so considerate, so good, to not on me only, but to everybody. She was so sensitive, she could recognize if somebody needed help, she would help. My father loved her. She was very inquisitive. She wanted to know. My father was reading to us every day in the evening. And she wanted to know questions, she wanted to know about the whole family, where they are, who there is, what's the name, where do they live. And this was a big help after the war, because I didn't know anybody who there was. Some were in France, some were in Argentina. She knew the names, and she knew the addresses, she knew everything. I don't know how she did it. I always said that she's walking encyclopedia, because she knew all the answers. But the point also was, when we were all readers at home, because maybe of my father, I don't know, we were readers. When she was reading a book or something, she came to my father and asked about certain things. My father explained to her, and that's the way it was. My father when we were reading a book, he could ask, what did you read? What did author try to teach you? What did you pick up from this? What's going to bring you in life? How much help is going to help you? All kind of questions. And my father loved her, because she was the one who always had questions. She was never reading a book without the questions. She always came, and my father was happy to answer her the questions. So the whole life, I was always with her, even in the time when we were in the ghetto. She always protected me. When we supposed to go already to concentration camp, because of her, I went home. She's supposed to go home because a friend of her was a doctor, and he was working with a German officer who was a doctor. And he said to her, I can send you home. I can do you a favor and send you home. He said, if you want to do me a favor, send this one home. This was me. And she and the other sister went to concentration camp, and because of her, I was another year home. Eventually, I had to go to camp too, but at the time when she could have been home for another year, maybe more, but she left me to go home because she is strong and she's bigger. She could go to the concentration camp. After the war, it was the same thing. She took care of me. I had no place to live, and after the war, everybody got a room. Where did I gonna sleep? I'm gonna sleep with Helena's room. And she was already married, and I was single. So I was going with them, and I was always with her. I was always with her. Wherever I turned, when we were after the war already, where we were living for a while through the winter in Florida. This was, I think, the best time of our lives because we were close to each other. When we came to America, her husband's family was in Cleveland. We didn't have anybody family. My husband's family was in New York. So we couldn't be close to each other. But whenever he had a chance, we looked at each other, we could live together and be together. This was the best thing at our life. So my memory are the best memory with her from childhood all the way to the end. I loved her very much. Lena, I love you. I always did, and I always will. Thank you.
Wait a second, let me go on this side. Mommy, hold on to me, Mom.
Sit.
It's okay, come.
I wouldn't mind saying something. First of all, thank you all for sharing her life with her. It's your time with her that was so special to her and to us because you were part of her life. And if you think about who do you admire most, I've thought about that. And I think the person I admire most wasn't the inventors, it wasn't the great investors, it wasn't the great explorers of our time. It was my mom, for everything she did and the kindness she shared. I thank the rabbi who we just met. He was kind to give us a couple of hours, and he got to understand the essence of my mom and how important she was. Now, I am so blessed to have her as a mother, Aunt Rose as an aunt, and Hannah, who are here, and of course my sister and Robert and Bud, and my 4 kids are here, and nieces and brother-in-law and sister-in-law. It means so much, and Robert's family, all of you. Each and every one of you was important to her, and she loved you. She couldn't communicate with us in the last few years, not in something we understood, but we always understood her smile, and there was nothing more wonderful than to see her smile. She didn't always know my name, but she recognized me, and when she saw me, the smile went from ear to ear. As the rabbi pointed out, she was a gardener. And by the way, she did get permission to take a cutting. She didn't just walk into people's yards and, hey, I like that, I'm going to cut it. But she's right. She was a gardener. And I don't know this by heart, but it's a poem that reminds me much of her. And if you'll indulge me, I'd like to say it. My mother kept a garden of her heart. She planted all the good things that gave my life a start. She turned me to the sunshine and encouraged me to dream, fostering and nurturing the seeds of self-esteem. And when the winds and rain came, she protected me enough, but not too much, because she knew I'd need to stand strong and tough. Her constant good example always taught me right from wrong, markers for my pathway that will last a lifetime long. I am my mother's garden. I am her legacy. And I hope today she feels the love reflected back from me. Thank you, Mom.
Very much. Would anyone else like to share a few words?
Did you want to? Yes. Maria, do you want to talk?
I also have a little poem to share. It's called Revelation. No more my heart shall sob or grieve. My days to nights dissolve into God's own light. Above the toil of life, my soul is a bird of fire winging the infinite. I have known the One and his secret play, and passed beyond the sea of ignorance dream. In tune with him I sport and sing. I own the golden eye of the Supreme. Drunk deep of immortality, I am the root and boughs of a teeming vast. My form I have known and realized. The Supreme and I are one. All we outlast. Love you, Tante Lena. Rest in peace.
Gloria.
I would just like to say about my mother that I was so fortunate to have a special 11-year relationship with her, and it was my privilege to be able to help her. Oh, sorry. Is this better? There. So I'll just repeat that for over 11 years we had a very special relationship, a very special bond. I considered it a privilege to be able to be part of that. And I would like to go on record as saying that it was because of that relationship and knowing my mother that gave my life real meaning.
We try to look for points of comfort in the calendar and the time that we find ourselves in. So therefore, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the amazing coincidence of what is going on today. We may know that today is the eve of the Jewish holiday of Sukkot. And Sukkot, coincidentally, with this theme of gardening, this theme of sprouting, this theme of happiness, that's what the holiday is all about. You know, the idea is that we have worked hard on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur to cleanse ourselves and bring ourselves closer to God and to find a new purpose and to feel a new connection. And the best way to show that is to go out into the sukkah. You go into this booth that's very temporary, that's not strong, it's not going to resist the winds, but that's just how you feel. You feel closer to God, you feel a connection. And what greater place to feel connected than is in the garden, is in with the nature all around you. And so besides that connection to Lena, obviously the idea of Sukkot is this time of happiness. You know, it's Zman Simchasenu, the time of our great joy. And so the holiday is just about being happy with what you have, happy with your survival, happy with what you've accomplished, happy with just being who you are at this particular time. So I think that it's very appropriate, that we have this holiday so close to this day of sadness. And also in the Jewish tradition, the holidays do cancel aspects of the Shiva. The holiday is so special. It says, it's such a happy situation. Even the mourners can step aside for a little bit and not have to mourn as much. So we think that she even thought about us in her kind ways in deciding when her time would be over and deciding her final day. So thank you for your time and thank you for joining in the memories. And I think I made a few mistakes in the presentation, but I think one thing I just wanted to clarify was that when she was writing to Argentina and she was informed of her brother's situation, he was still in Israel. So I think that was what the connection that was made, So the family was allowed to know about his situation in Israel, and then ultimately later on he came to New York. So she helped to bridge the Argentina-Israel gap. So following today's chapel service, we will be going in procession to the Zion Memorial Cemetery, which is located on Northfield Road near Rockside. And then following the services today, the family will receive friends at the Jones residence, and that is 630 Blue Spruce Trail in Chagrin Falls. And that'll be until 5 p.m. today, and then again on Monday from 1 to 5 p.m. Contributions are not mandatory or expected, but if one decides to make a contribution, they're welcome to be given to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. So at this point, I ask everyone to please rise for the memorial prayer. And then what we're going to do is we will recite Kaddish here in the chapel, and then a second time we'll recite it in the cemetery. I'll just be just 1 second. El malei rachamim, shaychein bam romim, hamsei menucha nechainal kanfei hashchina, b'malois kedoshim utahayrim kezayrakia mazhirim, es nishmas Leah bas Yechezkel shehalacha le'lama, bavor shanachnu mispalin bahad haskras nishmasa, began Eden te menuchasa, l'chein bal harachamim, yastirecha b'seisa kanafav le'olamim, v'yitzor b'tzar chayim is nishmasa, Adonai hu nachalasa, v'sanoach al mishkava b'shalom, v'nomar Amen. O God, full of mercy, who dwells on high, grant proper rest on the wings of the divine presence, in the lofty levels of the holy and the pure ones, who shine like the glow of the firmament. For the soul of our beloved Lena Zak Koenigstein, Leah bas Yechezkel, the daughter of Yechezkel, who has gone into her world, and for whom we pray. May her resting place be in the Garden of Eden, and may the Master of Mercy shelter her in the shelter of his wings for all eternity. and may he bind her soul in the bond of life. God is her heritage, and may she repose in peace on her resting place. And we say together, Amen. If you remain standing for just a moment longer for the recitation of the Kaddish. Folks can grab their things. We're going to ask for the pallbearers to please come forward. The pallbearers are going to escort the casket first out of the chapel, and then we will follow with the family behind, and then guests and visitors behind the family.
Any of those who would act as pallbearers, if you kindly step out at this time.
Feet up with perfect squares.
You take your time to get your coat and put your things together. We'll have to leave in a second.
Follow behind. You're going to follow behind.